Chapter 7, Part 2, Water and Shadow. Dawn spread its golden fingers across the glass spine, transforming the jagged formations from ominous silhouettes into prisms that scattered rainbow fragments across the sand. The small party emerged from their underground sanctuary with the caution of prey aware of lurking predators. Elian led them along a route only he could perceive, his steps confident despite the treacherous terrain that surrounded them on all sides. Thalia followed directly behind him, her gaze frequently drawn to the silver streak in his hair. It caught the morning light with unnatural brilliance, reminding her of stars glimpsed in the dreamscape they had shared. The memory lingered like perfume in still air, not quite tangible yet impossible to ignore. Kirshen brought up the rear, battle marks faintly visible beneath his skin even in their dormant state. He led the recovered striders with surprising gentleness, murmuring occasional encouragements when the creatures hesitated at particularly unstable stretches of glass.
"Fine beasts,"
he commented, patting Zephyr's scaled neck with obvious appreciation.
"Got more sense about this god's-forsaken terrain than most two-legged creatures I've guided through wildlands."
Their proprioceptive awareness demonstrates advanced neural adaptations,
he agreed, mechanical eyes constantly scanning their surroundings.
Probability calculations suggest we will clear the glass spine's eastern boundary in approximately 47 minutes, assuming current pace maintenance.
Elian, walking between Tavor and Kirshen, glanced back at the glass right with a subtle smile softening her normally serene features.
"Always numbers with you,"
she observed, voice carrying the musical cadence typical of hydromancers.
"Does nothing exist for you without measurement, Tavor?"
The glasswright tilted his head, artificial eyes clicking softly as they adjusted to focus on her face.
"Quantification provides clarity,"
he replied without defensiveness.
"Though I acknowledge certain phenomena resist numerical documentation. Your hydromantic resonance patterns, for instance, demonstrate harmonic complexities that exceed conventional mathematical expression."
Something in his tone, a softening of his typically precise delivery, suggested this might be the closest thing to a compliment the taciturn glasswright could offer. Lyrian's water tattoos pulsed slightly brighter in response, perhaps indicating pleasure at his awkward acknowledgement. Elian halted abruptly, raising one hand in a silent signal that froze everyone in place. His head tilted slightly, as though listening to sounds beyond ordinary hearing range.
"Something's wrong,"
he murmured, voice pitched low enough that only Thalia, standing directly behind him, could hear clearly.
"The glass shouldn't be this quiet."
Thalia strained her ears but detected nothing unusual. Only the faint crystalline tones that had accompanied their entire journey through the formation, the occasional whisper of wind across sharp edges.
"What do you mean?"
she asked softly.
"The glass spine sings,"
he explained, gaze scanning their surroundings with heightened intensity.
"Different tones, at different times of day, different harmonics when storms approach. Right now, it should be shifting from dawn song to day chorus, but instead..."
He didn't complete the sentence, but the tension in his shoulders completed the thought more effectively than words could have. Something had disrupted the natural patterns of this ancient battlefield, something that didn't belong.
"Change of plans,"
he announced to the group, voice still quiet but carrying the unmistakable tone of command.
"We need to split up. Too many tracks, too easy to follow."
"Split up?"
the warrior questioned, thick brows drawing together in obvious disapproval.
"Blood and bone. That's the first rule of what not to do when hunted."
"Conventional wisdom doesn't apply here,"
Elian countered, his hand moving to the curved knife at his belt in an unconscious gesture.
"They're expecting us to stay together, to head directly for Aquilon's last known position. We need to be unpredictable."
Lyrian stepped forward, water tattoos pulsing with subtle concern.
"The waters whisper caution,"
she said, her melodious voice carrying an undercurrent of unease.
"I sense disturbances in the moisture patterns ahead. Something that shouldn't be there."
"Thermal anomalies detected at bearing 043,
he confirmed, mechanical eyes whirring as they cycled through different perception modes.
Configuration suggests deliberate concealment rather than natural variance.
Elian nodded grimly, as though their observations confirmed his suspicions.
Trap ahead,
He stated flatly.
they've anticipated our most logical route.
Thalia felt the diplomatic mask she'd worn most of her life settling into place, a protective reflex in the face of danger. Years of political training had taught her to analyze situations without emotional interference, to calculate possibilities with the detachment of a master strategist.
My father would have sent search parties by now.
She observed, mind racing through implications.
If Lord Aurelius has mobilized forces to intercept us, he risks open conflict with Aquilon. That suggests whatever he wants is worth potential war.
She didn't complete the thought aloud. Whatever he wants is me, the blood of the Plague Maker, the key to either strengthening or breaking the ancient prison. The wellspring visions haunted her still, fragments of prophecy and history intertwining with present danger.
We need a diversion.
He decided, gaze moving from one companion to another as he assessed their capabilities.
Kirshen and Tavor will continue east, with Zephyr and 2 packs that suggest Lady Thalia's presence. Lyrian, Lady Thalia and I will circle north with Sirocco, then cut back toward the Weeping Stones rendezvous point.
The plan made tactical sense, yet something in his tone, a subtle hesitation when he mentioned keeping Thalia with him, caught her attention. Their eyes met briefly, and she recognized the conflict in his expression. The practical need to protect her, warring with awareness of her deliberate emotional distance since the wellspring.
Splitting the strongest fighters.
He observed, rolling his massive shoulders in what might have been disapproval or acceptance.
Bold move. Might even work if the Sovereign's too busy watching her perfect reflection to notice the real trail.
Strategic assessment indicates 43% probability of successful misdirection.
He stated, the precise delivery neither encouraging nor discouraging.
Insufficient data regarding pursuit capabilities precludes more accurate calculation.
The water follows the path of least resistance until it carves its own channel.
She murmured, the hydromancer's philosophical approach apparently accepting the plan.
We adapt or we drown.
With arrangements quickly finalized, they prepared to separate. Kashin secured bundles to Zephyr's harness, arranging them to suggest a human form when viewed from a distance. Tavor calibrated his mechanical eyes to maximum range, ensuring optimal surveillance as they traveled. Elian conveyed last-minute directions to both, indicating specific landmarks that would guide them to the eventual rendezvous point. Thalia found herself suddenly beside Lyrian, the hydromancer's serene presence offering unexpected comfort amid the tension of imminent separation.
Your waters run troubled.
The older woman observed quietly, blue-tattooed fingers briefly touching Thalia's wrist.
What the wellspring showed you, it continues to ripple through your spirit.
Thalia tensed, wondering if the hydromancer had somehow perceived the visions she'd kept private. But Lyrian's next words suggested more general perception rather than specific knowledge.
Ancient waters hold ancient memories.
She continued, her musical voice gentle with understanding.
They show what was, what is, sometimes what might be. But water teaches us that no course is fixed until it's travelled. Even stone yields to persistent drops.
Before Thalia could respond, Elian approached, his expression carefully neutral, though something in his dark eyes suggested continued awareness of the connection they had shared in the dreamscape.
We move in 3 minutes.
He informed them, gaze sweeping the crystalline terrain that surrounded them.
Light packs only. Speed matters more than comfort now.
The group separated with minimal ceremony, necessity overriding sentimentality. Kirshen and Tavor headed east with Zephyr, quickly disappearing behind a massive formation of obsidian glass that rose like a frozen wave from the desert floor. Elian led Thalia and Lyrian northward, navigating a path so narrow and treacherous it seemed impossible until walked. For over an hour, they traveled in relative silence, the only sounds their careful footsteps on glass and Sirocco's occasional soft trilling when particularly difficult terrain was successfully negotiated. The strider moved with surprising grace despite his size, distributing weight with instinctive precision across surfaces that would have shattered under less careful passage. Eventually, the glass spine's density began to diminish, jagged formations giving way to more scattered arrangements with increasing stretches of sand between crystalline structures. The tension in Elian's shoulders eased slightly as they reached what appeared to be the formation's northern boundary.
We'll circle back toward the rendezvous from here,
he announced, voice still pitched low despite the apparent absence of pursuit.
There's a hidden spring about 5 miles southwest, not marked on any official maps. We can replenish water supplies there before the final stretch.
A spring?
The hydromancer questioned, head tilting slightly as though listening to something beyond ordinary hearing range.
I sense no significant moisture concentrations within that radius.
It's shielded somehow,
he explained, the silver streak in his hair catching sunlight as he gestured toward the distant horizon.
Desert nomads maintain it. Some kind of crystal arrangement that disrupts detection. You'll sense it only when we're practically standing on it.
They resumed their journey, the terrain gradually transforming from glass-dominated landscape to more conventional desert. Rolling dunes interspersed with occasional rock formations weathered into fantastic shapes by centuries of sand-laden winds. The sun climbed higher, its heat pressing against them with increasing intensity as morning gave way to early afternoon. By the time they spotted the spring, or rather the subtle arrangement of stones that marked its location, they had been traveling for nearly 5 hours without rest. Thalia felt weariness settling into her limbs, the combination of physical exertion and unresolved emotional tension exacting its toll despite her diplomatic training in endurance. The spring itself proved as remarkable as Elian had suggested. Nestled within a shallow depression surrounded by unremarkable boulders, its existence would have remained completely undetectable if not for the deliberate marker stones or prior knowledge. Crystal formations lined the small pool, their arrangement clearly artificial, though their purpose remained mysterious to Thalia's untrained eye.
We'll rest here briefly,
he decided, helping Sirocco settle into a comfortable position where the strider could reach the water without risk of contaminating it.
30 minutes maximum, then continuing southwest.
The water here is unusual,
she observed, kneeling beside the pool with evident fascination. Her tattoos pulsed with increased luminescence as she extended one hand above the surface.
It carries resonance patterns I've never encountered before. Neither natural spring nor artificial reservoir. I should collect samples,
she murmured, reaching for specialized containers in her pack.
Aquilon's water engineers would find this invaluable if it could be replicated.
Elian turned to Thalia, who had seated herself on a relatively comfortable boulder at the spring's edge. His expression carried that same careful neutrality he'd maintained since their shared dream experience. Professional concern without pushing boundaries she had clearly established.
You should refill your water flasks,
he suggested, checking the surrounding terrain with habitual vigilance.
The water here is safe to drink directly, unlike most desert sources.
Thank you,
she replied, matching his neutral tone despite the complicated emotions that stirred beneath her diplomatic mask.
Is the spring deep enough to wash as well? The sand gets everywhere.
A ghost of a smile touched his lips at her understated complaint. A brief glimpse of the connection they might have developed under different circumstances, without prophecy and sacrifice hovering on the horizon.
There's a slightly deeper section on the far side,
he indicated with a nod.
Still not enough for full immersion, but sufficient for refreshing hands and face at least.
Thalia nodded gratefully, gathering her water containers before moving towards the section he'd indicated. The small measure of privacy, being briefly out of direct sight behind a larger crystal formation, felt unexpectedly precious after days of constant companionship. She knelt beside the water, noting how the afternoon light refracted through crystal to cast subtle rainbows across its still surface. Her reflection stared back at her, familiar, yet somehow changed. The same features she'd observed all her life now carrying the weight of knowledge that had transformed her understanding of herself and her purpose. Daughter of the Plague Maker, she thought, tracing one finger through her reflection and watching it fracture into ripples. Bearer of blood that could either strengthen or break ancient bonds, something shifted in the water's surface, a distortion that didn't match the pattern of her ripples. For a fraction of a second, she glimpsed another reflection overlaying her own. A woman with indistinct features yet unmistakable presence. Eyes golden and terrible with ancient knowledge. Thalia jerked back from the water's edge, heart suddenly pounding against her ribs. The apparition vanished instantly, leaving only ordinary reflection on the pool's surface. Had she imagined it? A trick of light through crystal, perhaps? Or her own mind manifesting visions from the wellspring's revelations?
"Everything all right?" called Elian's voice from the other side of the formation, concern evident despite the distance.
Yes.
She replied automatically. Diplomatic training providing steady response despite inner turmoil.
Just startled by a lizard.
The mundane explanation seemed to satisfy him. No further inquiry following her response. Thalia forced herself to return to her task, filling water containers with efficiency, born of necessity rather than calm. Whatever she had glimpsed, whether genuine contact or mere imagination, reinforced the urgency of their situation. She had just secured the stopper on her final water flask when awareness prickled along her spine. That indefinable sense of being watched that transcends ordinary perception. She froze, suddenly conscious of how the spring's configuration had separated her from her companions, however temporarily. Something's wrong, she realized, instinctively reaching for the ceremonial dagger at her belt. More symbolic than practical, but better than nothing. The air around her seemed to thicken, shadows deepening despite the afternoon sun's continued brightness. "Elian!" she called, abandoning pretense of calm as she began moving back toward the main section of the spring. No response came. The silence that greeted her call carried unnatural quality, not merely absence of sound, but active suppression, as though something consumed noise itself.
Lyrian?
She tried again, pace quickening as she rounded the crystal formation. The scene that greeted her defied immediate comprehension. Where moments ago her companions had been peacefully resting beside the spring, now only empty space remained. No sign of struggle disrupted the sand, no indication of sudden departure marked the ground. Sirocco was simply gone, as were Elian and the hydromancer. Or perhaps she was gone, moved somehow without awareness of transition. The spring remained. The crystal formations continued their prismatic play with sunlight, but subtle wrongness permeated everything. The quality of light seemed altered, shadows falling at angles that contradicted the sun's position. The air carried faint metallic scent that hadn't been present before.
Perception manipulation,
she murmured, diplomatic training in recognizing magical influences asserting itself through initial panic.
Someone's altering either the environment or my perception of it.
As though her acknowledgement had broken some spell, the shadows around the spring's edge coalesced into more substantial darkness. From this emerging blackness stepped the umbral that had attacked Elian in the glass spine, its partially translucent form now bearing visible damage where Elian's silver blade had connected, a jagged disruption in its otherwise smooth silhouette. The shadow being made no sound as it approached, but its intention projected clearly enough without words. Behind it, more substantial figures emerged into view. 4 Bellatori warriors positioned to block potential escape routes, their battle trance marks already beginning to glow with activation. And finally, stepping from behind the largest crystal formation, came Loreen. The sovereign's perfect features arranged themselves in an expression of triumph, tinged with contempt, gold flecks swirling in her amber eyes like captured flame.
"Little mouse, all alone at the watering hole?"
she observed, her harmonically resonant voice seemingly designed to inspire both fear and awe.
"How very predictable."
Thalia's mind raced through possibilities, calculations, scenarios. Where were Elian and Lyrienne? Had they been captured already? Killed? Or was this entire scene some elaborate illusion designed to separate her from her protectors?
Where are my companions?
She demanded, drawing on years of diplomatic training to keep her voice steady despite the fear clutching at her throat.
"Oh, they're exactly where you left them.
The sovereign replied with casual cruelty.
Or rather, where you appear to be from their perspective."
She gestured toward the umbral, whose damaged form wavered slightly with the acknowledgement.
"Shadow weaving, crude but effective. They're having a lovely conversation with a perfect facsimile of little Thalia, while the real mouse is caught in my trap."
Understanding bloomed with cold clarity. The umbral was maintaining a double illusion, projecting Thalia's image to her companions while simultaneously hiding Lorene and her forces from Thalia until too late for escape. A perfect ambush, enabled by shadow manipulation that even Tava's mechanical perception might fail to detect, if not specifically calibrated for such deception.
What does Lord Aurelius want with me?
She asked, buying time while assessing options that dwindled with each passing second. The Bellatori had completed their encirclement, cutting off any possible retreat.
"Want?"
Lorene's perfect laugh held no warmth, only aesthetic beauty divorced from genuine emotion.
"Your presumption is charming, Mouse. Lord Aurelius doesn't want things. He claims what already belongs to him."
She stepped closer, her movements carrying inhuman grace that reminded Thalia of predators. Beautiful, lethal, Italy without mercy.
"But since you ask so prettily..."
The sovereign circled Thalia slowly, gold-flecked eyes never leaving her face.
"Your blood carries something ancient. Something that once changed the world and might do so again, with proper application."
Her perfect fingers brushed Thalia's cheek in a gesture of false tenderness.
"The Plague Maker's legacy flows in your veins, little Maravin. Did your father never tell you about your mother's lineage? About why those pretty violet eyes of yours are so unusual?"
Cold shock paralyzed Thalia momentarily. How could Lorene know what the wellspring had revealed? How could Lord Aurelius have discovered a connection that Thalia herself had only recently learned?
"A genuine surprise."
The sovereign observed with evident satisfaction.
"How refreshing. I'd worried you might prove tediously well-informed, given your little detour to the wellspring."
While she spoke, the Bellatori had drawn closer, their enhanced musculature tense with readiness to prevent escape. The umbral remained slightly apart, its damaged form requiring continued concentration to maintain the illusion that kept Elian and Lyrienne unaware of Thalia's predicament. They'll notice something wrong eventually, Thalia thought, seeking any fragment of hope in increasingly desperate circumstances. The umbral can't maintain this deception indefinitely, especially while injured.
"You're thinking your protectors will save you,"
the sovereign commented, her voice taking on that harmonically resonant quality unique to her kind. The subtle compulsion that bypassed rational thought to demand compliance.
"They won't. By the time the shadow weaving fails, you'll be far beyond their reach."
She gestured to the Bellatori warriors, who stepped forward in perfect synchronization.
"No permanent damage?"
she instructed them, voice carrying absolute authority that even these elite warriors couldn't resist.
"Lord Aurelius requires the vessel intact, but unconsciousness would make transport considerably more convenient."
Thalia's hand tightened around her ceremonial dagger, a gesture of defiance rather than practical resistance. Against 4 enhanced Bellatori and a sovereign, her chances approached 0. Yet surrender without struggle felt impossible, something within her rejecting submission on levels beyond rational calculation.
Whatever Lord Aurelius seeks, he won't find it.
she stated, voice steady despite racing heart.
The dream plague isn't a tool to be wielded. It nearly destroyed your kind once before.
Shock flickered across Lorene's perfect features, quickly masked by practiced control. The gold flecks in her eyes swirled more rapidly, the only visible indication that Thalia's words had disrupted her composure.
Fascinating.
She murmured, studying Thalia with renewed intensity.
The little mouse knows more than she should. All the more reason to deliver you quickly to Lord Aurelius.
She nodded to the nearest Bellatori warrior, who moved forward with enhanced speed that made his massive frame appear to blur slightly. Thalia raised her dagger in futile defense, knowing even as she did so that the gesture was symbolic rather than practical against such an opponent. The warrior's blow never connected. A sharp, crystalline tone cut through the air, pure and high like glass singing at perfect frequency. The umbral convulsed violently, its damaged form dispersing into fragments of shadow that could no longer maintain cohesion. With its concentration broken, the illusion surrounding the spring shattered. Lorene whirled towards the source of the disruption, fury transforming her perfect features into something terrible and inhuman. On the ridge above the spring stood Elian, a small crystal instrument pressed to his lips. The resonator he had used in the singing caverns, calibrated to disrupt shadow manipulation.
Let her go.
He called, voice carrying the rough edge that emerged in moments of greatest danger. Hope flared briefly in Thalia's chest, then died as quickly as it had ignited. For all his courage, Elian stood alone. No sign of Lyrienne accompanied him, suggesting the hydromancer had either been neutralized or sent for additional help. Against a sovereign and 4 elite Bellatori, even his desert skills offered little practical advantage.
How touching.
The sovereign commented, that terrible smile returning to her perfect lips.
The desert rat arrives to save his lady.
She gestured almost casually to 3 of the Bellatori warriors.
Kill him, slowly, if possible.
The enhanced warriors moved with frightening synchronization, already spreading out to approach the ridge from multiple angles. Elian reached for weapons at his belt, but Thalia knew with cold certainty that even his considerable skills couldn't overcome such odds. My fault, she thought, anguish cutting through fear. He's here because of me. He'll die because of me. The 4th Bellatori, still positioned directly behind Thalia, took advantage of her momentary distraction. A precise blow to the back of her head, calibrated for unconsciousness without permanent damage, sent darkness crashing through her awareness. As consciousness fled, her last sight was Elian's face. Determination and something deeper etched in his expression as he prepared to face impossible odds to protect her. I never told him, was her final thought before darkness claimed her completely. Never told him what the wellspring showed. Never told him the truth about us both. Then nothing remained but void, and the distant sensation of being lifted and carried away from the spring, away from Elian, away from whatever fragile connection they had begun to forge, despite destiny's approaching shadow. In darkness without dimension or duration, something ancient stirred. A presence older than the walking cities, older than the desert itself, reached through layers of unconsciousness to brush against Thalia's mind. Not with malice, but with terrible recognition. One prisoner perceiving another across boundaries of time and circumstance. The vessel awakens, whispered a voice like crystal chimes in the void. The key approaches the lock. Somewhere beyond reach of waking thought, the first sorceress smiled within her ancient prison, gold eyes fixed on approaching opportunity with the patience of centuries. Chapter 7, Part 3, Dreamwalker's Edge. The resonator's crystal tone still vibrated in Elian's fingertips as he watched Thalia crumple beneath the Bellatori's calculated blow. Time seemed to slow, stretching like desert heat across endless sand. His heart hammered against his ribs as 3 enhanced warriors began their approach, scaling the ridge with the predatory grace unique to their kind. Battle trance marks brightening as they activated combat enhancements. Elian tucked the resonator into his belt, fingers finding instead the curved knife of strange silver metal that had been his mother's final gift. The blade caught sunlight with unnatural brilliance, almost as though it anticipated the blood it would soon taste.
Outnumbered, outmatched. Exactly how I like it.
He thought grimly. Years of desert survival instinct overriding rational assessment of his chances. Wind whispered across the ridge, carrying the scent of blood and water as it stirred loose sand around his boots. He'd chosen his position with the instinct of a creature who had survived 1,000 desert dangers. High ground with treacherous footing that would neutralize the Bellatori's superior strength. They would be forced to climb through shifting sand that offered no solid purchase, or attempt risky leaps that would leave them vulnerable mid-air. The first warrior, a mountain of enhanced muscle with ritual scars crisscrossing his face, chose the latter option. He gathered himself at the ridge's base, powerful legs coiling like springs. "For Lord Aurelius," he roared, launching upward with explosive force that sent sand cascading down the slope. Elian waited, knife half raised, body deceptively relaxed. The Bellatori warrior reached the apex of his jump, triumph already transforming his scarred features as he extended blade-tipped hands toward his seemingly unprepared prey. Only then did Elian move. The silver knife flashed upward with impossible speed, meeting the descending warrior at the precise moment of maximum vulnerability. Contact between silver and flesh released a sound like crystal shattered by hammer, high and terrible. The blade passed through enhanced muscle and bone, as though they offered no more resistance than desert mist, leaving a wake of silver-blue luminescence where it cut. The Bellatori's battlecry transformed into a gurgling scream as his body separated along the knife's path, coming apart in a spray of blood that caught sunlight like rubies cast to air. Both halves tumbled past Elian to land with sickening finality on the ridge behind him. The silver blade dimmed instantly, its ancient magic dormant after that single devastating strike. Elian felt the change like sudden absence of limb, the knife now sleeping in his hand, its otherworldly power temporarily exhausted. The remaining Bellatori hesitated, their battle trance marks flickering with momentary uncertainty as they processed their comrade's brutal dispatch. Loreen's perfect features contorted with rage, gold flecks swirling violently in her amber eyes.
Kill him now,
she commanded, her voice carrying compulsion that the Bellatori could not resist despite freshly awakened caution. 2 warriors began climbing simultaneously, adopting the more cautious approach of scaling the sandy ridge rather than attempting the leap that had proven fatal to their companion. The third circled to the right, seeking an alternative path that might outflank Elian's carefully chosen position. Elian tracked all 3, calculating odds with the cold precision of someone for whom survival had never been theoretical. The silver knife, though depleted of magic, remained wickedly sharp in his right hand. With his left, he palmed a handful of fine sand, eyes never leaving the approaching Bellatori. The 2 climbing warriors reached the ridge's steepest section, their enhanced strength allowing them to make steady progress despite the treacherous footing. One pulled slightly ahead, a female warrior whose battle trance marks formed intricate patterns across exposed skin, suggesting elite status even among the enhanced. Elian waited until she was 3 steps from the crest, then kicked a cascade of sand directly into her face. She snarled, momentarily blinded despite her enhancements. In that critical moment of distraction, Elian lunged, driving his knife into her shoulder with surgical precision. Not a killing blow, but one that severed critical tendons controlling her dominant arm. She howled in pain and rage, her wounded arm hanging useless as she attempted to maintain position on the steep incline with only 3 functional limbs. Her male companion reached her position, using her momentary stability as a platform to launch himself toward Elian, with blade extended. Elian feinted right, then dropped flat as the blade whistled overhead. Rolling to his feet, he delivered a vicious kick to the male Bellatori's knee, feeling something snap beneath his boot. The warrior grunted but didn't fall, battle trance allowing him to fight through pain that would incapacitate ordinary humans. The wounded female regained her footing and resumed her advance, compensating for her injured arm with terrifying speed. Elian found himself retreating, giving ground he couldn't afford to lose. 2 against 1, even wounded, pushed the limits of his considerable skills. A flicker of movement from the corner of his eye warned him of the third Bellatori completing his flanking maneuver. Elian was being herded, pushed back from his advantageous position toward flat ground, where the Bellatori's superior strength would prove decisive.
Time to change the game,
he thought, backing toward a specific section of seemingly ordinary sand 20 paces behind his original position. Running desert rat, called the male Bellatori, blood darkening his leg where bone had pierced skin. His enhanced healing was already beginning to stabilize the injury, though his gait remained uneven. Nowhere to hide out here. Elian said nothing, conserving breath as he continued his strategic retreat. 10 paces from the target area, he abruptly changed direction, cutting sharply to his left across firmer ground. The male Bellatori, eager to close distance, took the most direct route, straight across the patch Elian had so carefully avoided. The sand shifted almost imperceptibly beneath the warrior's weight. Then, with devastating swiftness, it collapsed entirely, revealing the conical pit hidden beneath its surface. The Bellatori's battle-trained reflexes allowed him a single startled cry before a massive chitinous pincer erupted from the pit's center, piercing his enhanced body with terrible precision. The sand reaver, a predator that had evolved to hunt even the desert's most dangerous creatures, retracted its blood-slick appendage with practiced efficiency, dragging the still struggling warrior beneath the surface. The sand flowed back into place with unnatural smoothness, leaving only a faint dark stain to mark where the Bellatori had stood moments before.
Enough!
Lorene's outraged scream cut through the desert air like a physical blade.
Finish him, Carissa.
The female Bellatori, Carissa, responded to the compulsion with renewed aggression, her battle trance marks glowing with dangerous intensity. Despite her wounded shoulder, she moved with the fluid grace of a lifetime dedicated to combat, drawing a second blade from her belt to compensate for her disabled arm. Elian faced her on relatively even ground now, the advantage of high position sacrificed for the elimination of her companions. Blood trickled from shallow cuts across his forearms, where he had only partially deflected earlier strikes. Fatigue pulled at his muscles, his human limitations becoming increasingly apparent against an opponent engineered for warfare. Carissa attacked with methodical precision, each movement calculated to exploit his growing exhaustion. Her blade traced silvery arcs through desert air, edging ever closer to vital organs as his reactions slowed by fractions of seconds. A cut along his cheek, a graze across his ribs, a slice that barely missed his throat. The accumulation of near misses mapped his gradual decline.
Not enough,
he thought desperately as he narrowly avoided a thrust that would have punctured his lung.
Not enough to save Thalia.
The thought of her, unconscious, being carried away while he struggled against inevitable defeat, triggered something deep within him. The silver streak in his hair began to tingle with unfamiliar energy, a sensation like static electricity, but warmer, more alive. Behind his eyes, pressure built with alarming speed, similar to his blackout episodes, yet somehow controlled, directed. Carissa lunged again, blade aimed at his heart with deadly intent. Time seemed to slow around him, the Bellatori's movement becoming almost leisurely from his altered perspective. Without conscious decision, Elian reached not with his hand, but with his mind, touching the space between reality and dreamscape that his father had navigated with such natural ease. Images flooded from him into Carissa's consciousness. Not memories or ordinary visions, but nightmares pulled from the darkest corners of the collective unconscious. Her eyes widened in sudden terror as she found herself simultaneously in the physical world and a landscape of primal horror. Desert sand became consuming quicksand beneath her feet, the sky filled with shadow creatures that descended with hungry intent. The very air transformed into choking miasma that burned with each breath.
What is this?
She gasped, blade wavering as she fought phantoms only she could perceive. Blood began to trickle from her nose, her ears, her eyes. Physical manifestations of mental wounds as dream horrors became real enough to damage enhanced flesh. Elian watched with detached fascination, only partially aware that he was causing this impossible effect. The silver streak in his hair gleamed with unnatural brightness, starlight temporarily visible beneath his skin in patterns that matched constellations no human eye had ever mapped. Carissa screamed, a sound of pure terror rather than physical pain, as her battle trance marks began to darken and crack like pottery in extreme heat. Whatever nightmares she experienced had overwhelmed even her engineered resilience, breaking connections between mind and enhanced body that should have been unbreakable. She collapsed to her knees, blade falling forgotten from nerveless fingers. Blood vessels ruptured beneath her skin, creating spreading patterns of darkening bruises. Her eyes rolled back, showing only whites as her body convulsed with increasing violence.
Stop.
She begged between seizures, voice barely recognizable.
Please, stop.
The plea penetrated Elian's altered consciousness, horror at his own actions breaking the connection between them. The nightmares receded, leaving only the wounded Bellatori kneeling in desert sand, her enhanced body irreparably damaged by forces it was never designed to withstand.
Dream touched?
She whispered, blood bubbling between her lips.
He never said dream touched.
Her enhanced body gave one final shudder before going still, battle trance marks fading to dull grey as life departed. Elian stood over her, his own body trembling with aftermath of power he hadn't known he possessed. The silver streak in his hair still tingled, though the starlight beneath his skin had already faded. Breathing heavily, Elian turned to face Loreen, only to find empty desert where the Sovereign had stood moments before. His gaze swept the spring, searching for any sign of Thalia, the fourth Bellatori, or the golden-eyed Sovereign.
No.
He breathed, the single word carrying weight beyond its simplicity. At the edge of his vision, a dust cloud rose against the horizon. Already distant, the billowing trail evidence of riders pushing their mounts at breakneck speed across the unforgiving terrain. And she had taken Thalia with her.
Coward!
He shouted into the emptiness, voice raw with rage and desperation. The word vanished into desert air, heard by no one but himself and the 3 dead Bellatori who littered the ground around the spring. The silver streak in his hair had stopped tingling, leaving only hollow emptiness where strange power had briefly flowered. He forced himself to his feet despite protesting muscles, grimly assessing his injuries. Cuts and bruises, painful but not life-threatening. Exhaustion that pulled at every fiber of his being, demanding rest he couldn't afford. A soft, trilling sound broke his dark reverie. Sirocco approached cautiously from the direction of the spring, the strider's intelligent eyes conveying what might have been concern as he extended his long neck toward Elian.
Good timing.
He murmured, reaching up to stroke the creature's scaled neck.
I need your help, old friend.
The strider trilled again, lowering his body in clear invitation. Elian pulled himself onto the familiar harness, body protesting every movement. Once settled, he directed Sirocco toward the distant dust cloud, determination hardening into resolve that transcended physical limitations.
I'll find you,
he promised silently. The oath directed toward Thalia, though distance already separated them.
Whatever it takes, whatever price must be paid, I'll find you.
As Sirocco began his ground-eating stride across the desert, Elian's hand rose unconsciously to touch the silver streak in his hair, the mark of heritage he had spent a lifetime hiding. denying, suppressing. The power that had manifested during battle suggested possibilities he had never permitted himself to explore, abilities inherited from a father he had never known. Dreamwalker's son, half-blood between worlds. Perhaps that heritage offered more than inconvenient blackouts and occasional strange perceptions. Perhaps it might provide the edge needed to rescue Thalia from whatever fate Aurelius intended. The sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, shadows lengthening across desert terrain as Elian followed the trail left by Thalia's captors. Pain and exhaustion receded beneath single-minded focus, determination transmuting into a force almost as powerful as the Dreamwalker abilities that had briefly awakened during battle. Whatever awaited beyond the horizon, whatever confrontation approached with Aurelius and the forces he commanded, Elian would face it not just as a desert courier with exceptional skills, but as something more. Something that existed between worlds, between waking and dreaming, between ordinary and extraordinary. The silver streak in his hair caught the late afternoon sunlight, gleaming with promise of power not yet fully realized. Sirocco maintained his tireless pace, somehow sensing the urgency that drove his rider beyond normal endurance. Together they traveled toward uncertainty, toward danger, toward Thalia and whatever destiny awaited them all. Behind them, the hidden spring returned to deceptive serenity. 3 Bellatori corpses already being reclaimed by the desert that ultimately consumed everything within its endless domain. The Sand Reaver settled deeper into its conical pit, satisfied with unexpected bounty. The crystals surrounding the water continued their silent vigil, witnessing yet another chapter in the desert's ancient, ongoing story. And somewhere far beyond ordinary perception, beings with star-filled eyes watched unfolding events with growing interest. Dreamwalkers sensing awakening power in one of their estranged children, recognizing potential that might tip delicate balance between ancient prison and modern world. Shadows lengthened. Pursuit continued. And beneath it all, countdown toward inevitable confrontation advanced with each grain of sand that fell through time's unforgiving hourglass.